Good evening, friends of the Fringe. This is Night Signals, and I'm your host, Cliff Reynolds. Tonight's signal is being transmitted from a cabin deep in the Alberta foothills, under a sky that's too quiet to ignore. If you're hearing this, you've already crossed the threshold. Now, we've talked about the moon before. You've heard the stories, buzzing in the astronauts' ears, missing minutes in mission tapes, coordinates scrubbed from NASA archives. But Tonight, we're not chasing stories. We're chasing facts. My guest is investigative journalist and author Lucas Verran. He's just published a book that, if it holds up, could change how we look at the moon forever. The title? The Silent Citadel, Uncovering the Alien Presence on the Lunar Far Side. He's spent 15 years tracing satellite data anomalies, whistleblower transcripts, and declassified documents so obscure they were never even meant to be digitized. And let me tell you, folks, it's not just a theory, it's a case file. Lucas, welcome to Night Signals.
Thanks, Cliff. I've been wanting to have this conversation for a very long time.
Let's start with a simple one. Why the moon? Why the dark side? What pushed you into this rabbit hole?
The moon is a paradox. It's right there, always in our sky, always visible, but half of it is locked in perpetual secrecy. I first became suspicious when I was working on a different book about lost Cold War satellites. One of my sources, a former contractor from Boeing's aerospace division, showed me telemetry from a failed lunar orbiter in 1994. The failure wasn't mechanical. It was software override. I asked, who overrode it? He just said, not us. That moment, that's when the air changed for me.
You're saying there's intelligence out there actively interfering with probes that get too close to the far side of the moon?
Yes. And I can name at least 5 probes that suffered anomalous data loss while flying over the same latitude-longitude band on the far side, coordinates I call the Umbra Zone. You never hear about these in mainstream reporting because the missions are usually scrubbed, or the results filed under instrument failure. But I tracked the flight paths, every time, same arc, same blackout, and that's just the start.
Tell me about this zone. What's in it?
Roughly 173.5 degrees east, 11.2 degrees south, near the South Pole Aitken Basin, the largest known impact crater in the solar system. But beneath that is what I call Echo Echo Alpha Station, EEA for short. It's a hexagonal structure, about 6 kilometers across. I didn't find it, NASA did, in 2010. Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter passed over it and returned a thermal image with a dead zone, perfectly symmetrical, colder than the regolith around it. And then, that image was pulled, quietly. You can't find it in their archive anymore. But I had it. I printed it, stored it offline, and traced its original checksum. It's real.
A 6-kilometer hexagonal cold spot. That's not natural. That's not a rock formation.
Number. And the data suggests it's subsurface, not built on the moon, built into it.
Let's pause there. You're not just saying something's on the moon. You're saying it's embedded, buried, old dot.
Exactly. I believe it predates all human civilization, maybe predates Earth's biological complexity. The construction is too efficient, minimal surface disruption, total geometric regularity. I had structural engineers, off the record, look at the radar bounce patterns. They said it looks like it grew from inside out, like an inverted geode with hollow chambers. And that's what shook me. We're not just dealing with architecture, we're dealing with something that still functions.
You believe it's active?
There are thermal pulses, once every 11 days, aligned with perigee cycles. There are lunar reverberations, subsonic and localized, recorded during Apollo 17, but dismissed as settling rock. And one former NORAD analyst told me point blank, we track outgoing signals from that site, narrow band, narrow angle, never repeating. He called it heartbeat telemetry.
That's a long way from moon rocks and flagpoles. When we come back, we're going deeper into the Apollo connection, into the missing transcripts, and into the question that no one has dared to answer. If they're there, what do they want? This is Night Signals. Stay with us. Welcome back to Night Signals. I'm Cliff Reynolds, and if you're just tuning in, we're speaking with author and investigative journalist Lucas Verran, whose new book, The Silent Citadel, lays out what might be the most compelling case yet for an artificial structure, an alien base, hidden beneath the far side of the moon. Before the break, Lucas mentioned something chilling, that what's under the surface isn't just ancient, but still active. Lucas, I want to go back to Apollo, because if what you're saying is true, there's no way those early missions didn't stumble onto something. What's the connection?
They did stumble onto something, Cliff. Apollo 15, 16, and especially 17 all flew in trajectories designed to map gravity anomalies on the lunar surface. That's the official story. But I interviewed a retired JPL technician, off the record of course, who handled part of the transmission stream during the Apollo 17 mission. He told me, flat out, there's 36 minutes of EVA comms missing from the official logs. Not garbled, not damaged, just missing.
Deleted?
Number diverted, rerouted to a secure ground station in Australia. The official explanation was equipment recalibration. But when I tracked the path of the Saturn IV-B third stage impact on that mission, it landed shockingly close to the coordinates I mentioned earlier. 173.5 degrees east, 11.2 degrees south. That was intentional. They weren't just disposing of the stage. They were probing something.
You're saying they dropped a massive piece of metal onto the moon as a kind of sonar ping?
Exactly. And the results were alarming. You may have heard the phrase, the moon rang like a bell. That came from Apollo 12. But during Apollo 17's impact, the reverberations were different, more localized, contained, almost as if something underneath absorbed the shock and redistributed it.
What kind of something, Lucas?
A cavity, not natural, with geometric dampening fields. The analysts who saw that data were sworn into silence. I spoke to one decades later. He told me, his voice shaking, we found a ceiling.
A ceiling?
Not a cavern floor, not a fault line, a ceiling, as if they'd struck the top of a hollow chamber beneath the regolith. And here's where it gets darker. There are snippets of audio, leaked, spliced, scrubbed from the NASA archives, but preserved by private collectors. Astronauts whispering, not to mission control, to each other, saying things like, "That's not one of ours." Orient, it moved again.
Those recordings are real?
I've had them analyzed. The voice signatures match, the cadence, the breathing under the helmet, and in one of them, barely audible beneath static, an astronaut mutters a phrase I've never forgotten. The eye is open.
What do you think that means?
Some believe it was a metaphor, a description of an alien sensor array. Others think it refers to an actual entity. But I believe it's a code word, a signal. Whatever is under the moon, whatever has always been there. Apollo found it, and we haven't gone back since.
We've sent probes, rovers, high-resolution imaging satellites, but not humans.
Because humans saw something. Because humans can't be debugged like telemetry. The last real moment of contact was human, and whatever they saw, NASA made sure we wouldn't see it too.
Coming up, what happened to the whistleblowers? What's the connection between unmanned lunar missions and strange disappearances in data archives? And the question Lucas Verran has been warned not to ask, what if the moon isn't ours at all? This is Night Signals. Don't touch that dial. You're listening to Night Signals. I'm your host, Cliff Reynolds, and tonight we're joined by journalist and author Lucas Verran, whose new book, The Silent Citadel, makes the case that an alien installation exists beneath the far side of the moon. In the last segment, we touched on missing Apollo transmissions, seismic anomalies, and a phrase that still gives me goosebumps: the eye is open. Lucas, let's talk about the people, the men and women who tried to come forward. Scientists, contractors, insiders. What happened to the ones who spoke out?
Some of them disappeared from public view. Others recanted their statements suddenly and completely. A few died under what I would politely call compressed timelines. There's one case that sticks with me. Dr. Raymond Sills. He worked at the Applied Physics Lab in Maryland and had been subcontracted by NASA to review deep radar telemetry from the Clementine mission in 1994. He reached out to me in 2013, saying he had something I needed to see.
And what was it?
A set of documents and spectrograms showing energy return signals from the far side, readings that didn't match any known mineral or vacuum reflection. They showed harmonic returns, almost musical in nature. He said the data looked tuned, like it was responding. We arranged to meet in person. I bought a flight to D.C. He was going to bring everything. The night before our meeting, he suffered a sudden cardiac event at home. No prior history, no warning. He was 49 years old.
Let me guess, no files were ever found?
His apartment had been entered. The hard drive was gone. His wife said she'd never seen him so afraid in the days leading up to it. I've interviewed 5 people who told me variations of the same thing. They were warned, not by NASA, not by the government, by contractors, private, nameless intermediaries, black badge entities who don't appear on employment rolls.
You're talking about the breakaway layer, the ones who operate outside of traditional nation-state control.
Exactly. The privatization of space has created perfect insulation. If you want to remove someone from visibility, you don't need to threaten them anymore. You just erase their relevance. Make their findings proprietary. Reassign their work to a non-disclosure tier and delete their credentials. Suddenly they're not a scientist. They're a violator of contract. And no one listens to a violator.
Have you been warned, Lucas?
Yes. Twice by email. Once by phone. But it wasn't a threat. It was a caution. A reminder. The caller said, "Not everything on the moon is dormant. Choose your questions carefully." And then they hung up.
Do you believe they're monitoring you now?
Let me put it this way. Every time I upload a file related to this topic to a public cloud, it's corrupted within 48 hours. Every time. I've taken to working offline, printing physical copies, storing backups in temperature-controlled vaults. I use air-gapped laptops now. And the deeper I get, the more I realize. There's a choreography to this suppression. It's not just about hiding the truth. It's about isolating it. Like the moon itself, always facing us, but never showing everything.
What do you think would happen if this went public? If your book caught fire? If someone from inside finally blew the whistle in a press conference, full daylight, cameras rolling?
Then I think another crisis would be manufactured to drown it, and no one would even notice. Because the people running this operation aren't worried about belief. They're worried about understanding. The moment the public sees the moon as an occupied object, a domain, it's no longer a rock. It's territory.
And territory implies ownership.
Exactly. And if someone else owns it, then everything we've built, our satellites, our GPS systems, our dreams of colonization, sits on a very fragile lease.
When we return, the strange alignments in lunar orbit, the mystery of the Chinese relay satellite, and the question that haunts this entire conversation. Are we the intruders? You're listening to Night Signals. I'm Cliff Reynolds. Stay with us. This is Night Signals. I'm your host, Cliff Reynolds, and we are in deep tonight with investigative journalist Lucas Verran. Lucas's new book, The Silent Citadel, is a cold, meticulous, unnerving look into what lies beneath the far side of the moon. So far, we've heard about mission anomalies, whistleblower silences, and hidden architecture buried beneath the regolith. But here's where we push a little further. Lucas, I want to talk about orbital patterns. You've written extensively about what you call the leaseholder hypothesis. Tell us what that means.
The leaseholder hypothesis is simple. The moon isn't empty. It's occupied. But more importantly, the moon is not a passive object. It behaves quietly, precisely, as if someone else already claimed it. We're not colonizing a rock. We're trespassing on a domain. Let me give you a very specific example. In 2019, China launched the Quixiao relay satellite to orbit the Moon's L2 point, a gravitationally stable region beyond the far side. Now, publicly, that was to allow communication with the Chang'e 4 lander. But I found something strange when I looked at Quixiao's path. Its orbit shifted, subtly, but measurably, over a 36-hour period. Then, the telemetry data went dark, for 6 full hours.
Any explanation?
None that makes sense with normal orbital mechanics. There was no solar event, no propulsion correction listed in the official logs. It just moved. When the data resumed, Quixiao was back on course. Some theorists would say that's a glitch. I say, something nudged it, something that didn't want a direct line of sight.
You think the relay satellite crossed a boundary?
Or entered an active detection field, one that triggered a repulsion or masking response. And here's the clincher. In the same time frame, a radio observatory in New Zealand picked up a burst of ultra-narrowband microwave noise. It only lasted 8 seconds. They couldn't triangulate the source. Too clean, too precise. But the frequency matched a curious artifact found in 1969, a spike on the Apollo 11 lander recorder just moments before touchdown.
You're suggesting there's a control system.
I'm saying we're dealing with territorial intelligence, not necessarily biological, maybe machine, but definitely intentional. And here's the part no one wants to hear. Every orbital asset we place near the far side, every probe that lingers too long, experiences anomalies that fall just shy of public attention. They're not aggressive, they're corrective, like a gentle hand brushing aside a fly.
So the term leaseholder, that's not metaphorical, you mean it literally.
I believe we are subtenants in the solar system, and the Moon is a posted notice. We're allowed to visit, to glance, but not to stay.
Have there been consequences?
There's a theory, never proven, but quietly passed around certain engineering circles, that the Challenger and Columbia disasters weren't simply the result of technical failures, but warning signals, not directed by a government, but by an intelligence that does not distinguish between nation-states. Think about the timing, Cliff. Both missions carried components for long-term space infrastructure. Satellites, observation modules, microlabs, each one a piece of the human ambition to permanently inhabit space. And both missions were lost in violent, public spectacle.
That's a hard pill to swallow.
Which is exactly why it works. No one wants to believe in a force so patient, so indirect, that it only acts when a line is about to be crossed. But if you step back and look at the big picture, the Moon isn't just a celestial body. It's a border marker.
And the border isn't between countries. It's between us and something else.
Exactly. We've been warned, Cliff. Not loudly, but clearly.
When we come back, the strange electromagnetic patterns pulsing from the lunar surface, the theory that the Moon itself may be more than just occupied, it may be engineered, and a question that haunts every late-night researcher: what if we've never actually been alone in any sky? This is Night Signals. Stay with us. This is Night Signals, and tonight we are venturing deeper into the shadows than perhaps any conversation we've had before. I'm Cliff Reynolds, and with me is Lucas Verran, investigative journalist, data archivist, and author of The Silent Citadel, a book that lays out a chilling hypothesis. There is an alien base beneath the far side of the Moon, and it may not be the only unnatural thing about our closest celestial neighbor. Lucas, before the break, you brought us to a threshold, the idea that the Moon isn't just occupied, but that it might actually be engineered. Let's cross that threshold. What makes you think the Moon itself is not a natural object?
There's a convergence of anomalies, Cliff. Orbital, geological, acoustic, and electromagnetic. Each one is strange on its own, but together they suggest design. Let's begin with its orbit. The moon is in what's called synchronous rotation. One side always faces Earth. That's rare, but not impossible. What is almost impossible is the precision of that lock. The moon's mass distribution should make its spin unstable, and yet it's perfectly balanced, as if it were adjusted. Even more curious, the moon's orbit is nearly circular. Most captured bodies have elliptical orbits, but the moon's eccentricity is so slight it almost defies the odds. Some researchers, quietly, always quietly, believe the moon didn't form naturally. They believe it was placed.
Placed? You mean towed here?
That's one hypothesis. A few radical astrophysicists have modeled the moon as a shell structure, a hollow or partially hollow sphere with reinforced inner walls. That would explain why it resonates like a bell after impacts, as recorded during the Apollo missions. But it would also explain something else: its ability to amplify and regulate tidal forces. The moon doesn't just cause tides. It shapes them. It modulates their rhythm. That rhythm is what stabilized early Earth's climate and may have even allowed for the emergence of life. In other words, the moon didn't just make our planet habitable, it may have calibrated it.
You're suggesting the moon is a kind of environmental regulator?
Exactly. A celestial tuning fork. And now, we're finding more evidence. Electromagnetic readings taken by lunar orbiters show something deeply bizarre. Pulses of low-frequency radiation emerging from specific points beneath the crust. They occur in intervals, every 11.2 Earth days, and they repeat. Not natural, not random. These are timed emissions, not strong enough to interfere with Earth systems, but precise enough to suggest a function.
A function, like a transmitter?
Or a keeper. There's an ancient theory, in both Sumerian and Vedic texts, that speaks of the moon as the Watcher's throne. It's not allegory, it's literal. Imagine a machine so old, so well placed that entire civilizations rise and fall beneath its gaze, never knowing they are being monitored, perhaps even guided, not interfered with, not directly, but shaped from above.
That's a different kind of control, quiet, structural. It's not what we'd think of as alien. It's ancient administration.
Exactly. And here's something that chills me every time I think about it. The moon is 400 times smaller than the sun, but 400 times closer to Earth. That's why eclipses work. That's why we even see a corona. It's the perfect ratio. So perfect, in fact, that it only works from here, from Earth. What are the odds? And more importantly, what's the purpose?
Do you believe the moon is still active, not just in a mechanical sense, but as part of an intelligence?
I believe it's dormant in the way a computer is dormant, until you enter a keystroke. I believe it listens. I believe it stores. And most disturbing of all, I believe it may be reactivating.
What makes you say that?
Because in the past 15 years, low-frequency emissions from the moon have intensified. They've become more complex. And there's a new pattern emerging, an onset tone, like a boot sequence. Some of us call it the lunar handshake. We think something is waiting, and that something is beginning to wake up.
When we come back, the failed mission logs you were never meant to see, the lunar archaeology's locked-in transmission archives, and the final forbidden question, did something build the moon for us? You're listening to Night Signals. Don't go anywhere. This is Night Signals, and I'm your host, Cliff Reynolds. If you've been with us since the top of the hour, then you already know tonight's broadcast may be one for the archives. Our guest is Lucas Verran, journalist, researcher, and author of The Silent Citadel, a work that pulls no punches in suggesting that the moon is not just occupied, but potentially artificial. Lucas, let's talk about what you call the buried transmissions. Not just metaphorically buried, but archived, sealed, renamed, misfiled, and in some cases overwritten entirely. What did you find in the system?
This is where it gets surreal, Cliff, because I didn't find what I was looking for. I found what I wasn't supposed to be able to find. When I was granted access to a digital mirror of the Department of Defense's older electromagnetic observatory logs, purely by accident, mind you, I began noticing certain anomalies in the file names. Each file had a metadata tag for location, time, and signal type, but scattered across a 5-year period, from 1978 to 1983, there were 11 files marked only with a single phrase, origin, lunar unknown.
That's an official government file tag?
It shouldn't be. There's no standard in any declassified documentation for that phrase. But there it was, 11 times. I opened the first one. It was a heavily compressed audio file, barely audible. But when I ran it through an AI acoustic model, something became clear. There was a pattern underneath the static. Not a voice, not music, but a series of ascending harmonic tones, pulsed with perfect mathematical spacing.
You mean like a code?
Like a greeting, or a reminder. These weren't recordings from Earth. These were lunar returns, bursts that bounced off the moon and came back changed. A few contained what I can only describe as layered reflection. Imagine sonar that not only pings back your own signal, but embeds another signal inside it. Something was listening, and it responded by hiding within the reply.
Are these files public?
They were, briefly. I downloaded 6 before the server was pulled offline. When I returned to the Mirror archive, the directory had been wiped clean. But here's where it gets even more disturbing. A week later, a man I've never met left a package at my P.O. box. No return address, no name. Inside were printed spectrograms, visual renderings of the audio frequencies I'd downloaded. Across the spectrograms were symbols, geometric, recursive, spiraled. One of them matched a glyph found carved into a fragment recovered from the crashed lunar module, Surveyor 3.
Wait, Surveyor 3 was launched in 1967. That would predate Apollo.
Exactly. And when Apollo 12 visited the Surveyor landing site, they recovered parts of it, including a camera and metallic arm. What NASA didn't say is that those parts had microscopic etchings. Unexplained. Not machine-made. They dismissed it as abrasion. But some believe the Surveyor didn't just land. It was tampered with. Tagged. Marked. By whatever lives inside the moon.
And these markings match what you found in the sound spectrograms.
1-to-1. Perfect match. Cliff, someone, or something, is embedding symbols in sound, using our own instruments as relay points, and we've been deleting the evidence for 50 years.
Why? What's the motive behind suppressing this?
Because this is beyond life, beyond biology. This isn't a discovery. It's a handshake with a system older than our species, a memory field built into the structure of the moon. And if that's true, then the moon isn't just a satellite. It's a repository. Of what exactly? I can't say. But someone left behind a very specific message. You are being remembered.
When we come back, the code in the craters, the phantom echoes from Apollo's last minutes, and the growing theory that humanity's evolution itself may be entangled with the architects of the moon. This is Night Signals. Don't drift too far. This is Night Signals. I'm Cliff Reynolds, and we are in the deep waters now, far beyond the edges of public knowledge and into something far older, far colder, and perhaps far closer than we've ever imagined. Our guest is Lucas Verran, author of The Silent Citadel, which lays out the argument that the moon is not a natural object, nor merely a dead one, but a deliberately constructed repository, possibly engineered by a non-human intelligence for reasons that remain veiled. Lucas, in your final chapters, you introduce what may be the most staggering theory yet, that human evolution itself might not be fully terrestrial, that our very development may have been interfaced. Let's go there.
This is where the data becomes more philosophical than forensic. But here's the basis. Human beings are anomalous. We appear on Earth's timeline like a software patch, rapid brain growth, sudden social complexity, accelerated tool use. Anthropologists call it the Great Leap Forward, but no one knows exactly why it happened. Now consider this. The Moon has existed in its current orbit for approximately 4.5 billion years. But life on Earth didn't explode in complexity until after the Moon had settled into position. The tidal cycles it created began regulating Earth's climate, ocean mixing, and seasonal rhythms. Those conditions made life possible, but the jump to consciousness, that's the mystery, and here's where it gets wild. In several of the lunar audio return files I recovered, there are patterns that mimic the structural rhythm of human EEG waves. Specifically, alpha states associated with dreaming.
You're saying the signals reflect brainwave patterns?
I'm saying they precede them. There's a harmonic structure within those signals that, when mapped, appears to predict human dream frequencies, as if the Moon isn't just reflecting our minds, but shaping them.
You're not the first to suggest the Moon affects more than the tides. Theories about full moons and behavior go back centuries.
And perhaps for good reason. The Moon's electromagnetic field is negligible, but it's a perfect reflector of cosmic radiation. We've long thought it passive, but if it's actually cycling and filtering signals, acting as a kind of consciousness amplifier, then the question isn't whether it affects us. It's how deep the influence goes. Some call this the architect theory. It suggests that the same intelligence that built the Moon also catalyzed human neurology, that our brain's modular structures, language, abstraction, memory, weren't just evolutionary coincidences. They were bootloaded.
Designed?
More like seeded, nudged, not overtly, not in the science fiction sense, but in the way you would plant a resonance, a call and response. The Moon emits, we dream, and somewhere in that loop, we became self-aware.
Lucas, you've written about a specific pattern seen in lunar crater alignment, not topographical but geometric, something that relates to this architectural premise. Can you explain that?
Absolutely. When analyzing high-resolution topographic data from the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, I noticed that certain craters on the far side are arranged in nearly perfect dodecahedral spacing, like nodes on a grid. But here's the strange part. Their distribution only aligns in 3 dimensions when modeled against Earth's geomagnetic field. In other words, the craters form a harmonic map, only visible when correlated with Earth's energy output. It's as if the Moon was placed not just anywhere, but precisely where it needed to be to form a standing resonance with Earth itself. And that resonance, Cliff, it matches the Schumann frequency, our planet's natural heartbeat, the same frequency human brains produce during deep meditation.
So this is no longer a question of aliens or bases or even architecture. You're suggesting that the Moon is a bridge between Earth and something else.
Yes, a translator, a vault, or a mirror that bends what it reflects. It doesn't just watch us, it shapes the conditions under which we can understand ourselves.
So then the final question becomes, was this gift or containment ?
I ask myself that every day, because when I stare at the Moon now, I don't see a celestial body. I see an interface, and I wonder, what's on the other side of the screen?
When we return, the final message is the evidence that something under the Moon is listening again. And Lucas Verran's personal account of what happened the night he saw a signal return in real time. And this is Night Signals. And tonight the sky is very much awake. Cliff Reynolds, you're listening to the final segment of Night Signals. I'm Cliff Reynolds, and tonight we've been walking the shadow's edge with Lucas Verran, whose new book, The Silent Citadel, makes a convincing case that the Moon is not what we were told, that beneath its dust and craters lies not just an alien structure, but an intelligence, an architect, and perhaps even an agenda. Now, Lucas, I want to close tonight with something personal. You write about a moment, one night late last year, when you believe you received a signal. Not theory, not secondhand. You were there. Take us into that moment, Lucas Verran.
It was November 3rd, 2:13 a.m. I was at a remote cabin I sometimes rent in northern Ontario, off-grid, with only a diesel generator and a portable low-frequency array I built myself. That night the moon was full, perfectly clear, low on the horizon. I had the antenna pointed near the limb, close to the southern highlands, where I believe part of the subsurface structure is exposed. I wasn't expecting anything. The rig was set to record ambient resonance patterns, just background, like I'd done dozens of times before. But then I heard it.
Cliff. Heard it? Through the equipment? Lucas.
No, outside. There was a low hum, not mechanical, not environmental. It sounded like a breath through stone. My rig lit up, slow at first, then spiking with amplitude. I watched the feed scroll and realized the signal was not static. It was structured. 7 tones, identical spacing, then silence. Then the pattern repeated, 7 tones, a pause, then 7 more. But it wasn't just audio. My laptop, offline, completely disconnected, flickered to life. The screen showed a black background, then white text, 1 word.
Cliff. What did it say? Lucas.
Received.
Cliff. My God. Lucas.
I pulled the power. Everything shut down. But I swear to you, Cliff, after the hum ended, the moon looked different. There was a faint shimmer, not like heat or fog, more like distortion. I stepped outside, stood in the snow for what felt like hours, just looking up, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I was being looked at too.
Cliff. Lucas, was it a response or a confirmation? Lucas.
I don't know, maybe both, but what I do know is that nothing since that night has felt quite the same. The world has a vibration to it now, as if we're no longer waiting for contact, but already inside it. And Cliff, this is the part that keeps me up at night. The signal repeated the next night, but the tone changed. It wasn't a greeting. It was a question.
Cliff. A question? Lucas.
Not in language, not in anything human, but in the shape of the frequencies. A rise, a pause, then 3 descending tones, slow, deliberate. I've since reconstructed the signal as a waveform. I've shown it to mathematicians, biologists, even a linguist. One of them, a specialist in proto-language cognition, said, "This looks like it's asking for a key."
Cliff. Lucas. If this is all real, if what you've uncovered is only the beginning, what happens next? Lucas.
We stop calling it the moon. We stop thinking of it as a backdrop. We begin seeing it for what it really is, a system, an observer, a mirror, and maybe even a gate. And if we are indeed inside some kind of contact sequence, then humanity's next great discovery won't be out there among the stars. It'll be what's been watching us from above this whole time.
Cliff. Lucas Verran, thank you for joining us tonight. Friends, you've heard what he's uncovered. Now you have to decide, was it all just myth in a modern shell? Or has the moon been trying to speak all along? And we've only just now begun to hear it. You've been listening to Night Signals. I'm Cliff Reynolds. Keep your eyes on the sky. And if it ever looks back, remember what you heard here.